Good evening, and welcome to The Way Out Show. I'm your host, Dane McCarthy, broadcasting to you from FEMA Region 5, deep in the bowels of the United Police State of Amnesia. Today is October 8th, 2015. The clip that I have to show you today is pretty interesting. It's an interview by InfoWars journalist Leanne McAdoo, and she's interviewing a gentleman who is involved in robotics. He's a professor, he's an expert, and he's very concerned about the future of autonomous robots used in warfare. He's concerned because the moral aspects, the legal aspects, the proliferation of these autonomous and semi-autonomous robots. This whole technology has been developing very fast in the last few years. This is not science fiction anymore. We might think of it as something happening 20 years down the road. No, it's happening now. He's talking about, in the interview with Leanne, autonomous robotic submarines that can sink ships and other submarines. It's talking about battlefield man-like robots that would be fighting people. It's talking about armed drones that could be used for crowd control and are already being used for crowd control. He mentions that in North Dakota they just passed a law not more than a few weeks ago which would make the use of armed drones legal in North Dakota by the police. And non-lethal weaponry, tasers, rubber bullets, tear gas, that type of thing. Some of it is pretty amazing, pretty chilling. For a guy my age who grew up reading science fiction, and the stories, the exciting science fiction stories in which people are fighting against a futuristic totalitarian society, like a global society, this description, this interview seems to point to our future being very similar to those fanciful science fiction tales from many decades ago. So it appears that the science fiction writers were closer to the truth in many cases than a young reader could ever have imagined. And they try to look at what could it be the outcome? Could there be any positive outcome from this? Is there anything we can do? So I'm going to show you that clip, and then we'll get back and talk about a few of the other things that are going on in the world. So let's roll that clip.
Now, the United Nations has been warned that delays in negotiations over the future of lethal autonomous weapons, or killer robots, they're moving too slowly to stop robot wars from becoming a reality. Now, experts, including physicist Stephen Hawking, Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, Tesla CEO Elon Musk, they've all warned that proliferation of autonomous weapons would make a global arms race inevitable. Now, my guest today is Noel Sharkey. He is the Emeritus Professor of Artificial Intelligence and Robotics at the University of Sheffield. And after years of detailed research within artificial intelligence and robotics, Noel's core research interest is in the ethical application of robotics and AI in areas such as the military, surveillance, and criminal terrorist activity. He's currently serving as chair of the NGO, the International Committee for Robot Arms Control. They're a group, they've been campaigning against the use of military robots. Noel, thank you so much for joining us. So talk to me a little bit about this stall at the UN. What does that mean? How is that setting us up for killer robot arms race?
Well, we went to, there's a committee at the UN called the CCW, And that's the committee that's really designed for prohibiting certain sorts of weapons that are unnecessarily injurious, like fragments on the battlefield, landmines, those things. And we went to them, we got mandates from them, so they've run expert meetings, and they've run expert meetings 2 years in a row now for 5 days each time. But now we want them to move forward to the next stage of negotiation. But what they're saying is that next year they're going to go for another expert meeting. And this is becoming like an annual conference instead of moving towards getting groups of government experts together and discussing a possible treaty.
And so, what do you believe is causing that delay? I know in one of the articles there, I mean, we have all of these ethicists warning of the potential dangers, and yet they're stalling. And we know that there are already some of these semi-autonomous weapons in use, and the development of so much more.
Yes, they're developing pretty quickly. The US have guidelines that prevent them being acquired for a period of 5 years. And there's another 2 years to run on that. But in the meantime, DARPA, your Defense Advanced Project Research Agency, is developing like crazy, really. They keep issuing new contracts for tender, like they're looking at swarms of autonomous boats that can swarm another craft. They're looking at swarms of planes. They're looking at autonomous submarines that can go under the water and sink other submarines, but they could sink ships as well, of course. So the technology is developing and developing. And the point is the language that the US and UK have insisted on using at the UN is that these are meetings about emerging technologies. Now, China have said they want it to be about existing and emerging technologies. Now, the problem with the wording emerging technologies, and it is an emerging technology, but if we keep on at this for another 3 or 4 years, by that point, they will no longer be emerging, they'll be there, and so the treaty won't have any teeth to ban them.
Wow. And then so the US and the UK are insisting that using this wording, I guess a lot of money is going into the development of these machines.
Yes, but of course they're not saying that that's why they're doing it, but it just strikes anybody with any sense that that's what's happening. But the machines are quite dangerous. I mean, they're really obviously, when in the discussions, I've learned an awful lot in the discussions, and I've been working in this campaigning since 2007. But I've learned an awful lot at the UN in recent times about the kind of military reasons for having them. But it's so important that all nations discuss this, because when the US talks about this, they seem to have this idea that they will developing them and all other nations' technology will stay exactly as it is today. So when they're doing these kind of scenarios to test the weapons, they're thinking that China and Russia and these countries will have exactly the same weapons that they have today. Whereas in actual fact, what we're going to see is an arms race and mass proliferation. And at the moment, there's nothing against that. There are no laws against these whatsoever. So if we get mass proliferation and billions of dollars, because there's billions of dollars at stake here, big companies involved, if billions of dollars get involved, then, you know, how are we ever going to stop it?
Exactly. And just speaking earlier about the terrifying power of tech giants, Google, as a matter of fact, they've jumped into airspace monitoring. They want to make room for drones there, so they want to control that airspace. But they've also recently acquired Boston Dynamics. So it's one of the most advanced robotics company in the world, making robots for the military. What does Google need with that?
Five robot companies, major ones, all the best ones in the world. Now, Google said that they would only see out the existing contracts with the Boston Dynamics. So they had a couple of years of contracts left for the military, and they said they wouldn't do anything more with the military. But what's happened? Just 3 weeks ago, I found out that there's a brand new Google robot, like the big dog that you all know, called Spot, and it's being tested by Marines. So I don't know what Google are playing at here, what sort of game they're playing at, but it seems very strange to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And to have the foresight there to go ahead and control the airspace that the drones are going to be flying in. So obviously something's going on.
They're competing with Amazon. Amazon in Europe are trying at the moment with the regulators to get a whole portion of airspace. It's something like 200 yards and 1,000 feet in the air, and they want to control that airspace so they can start doing a lot of Amazon deliveries. And I think Google and they are competing with each other for this.
Right.
I, I mean, that seems like a crazy idea as well, really,
Yeah.
because if you think about the number of deliveries, are we going to see the sun at all? I mean, the sky's just going to be littered with these things, and it's so easy when you've got that kind of stream of stuff to slip some machines with bombs in them onto that stream, and we could never detect it. So it's very worrying. I mean, there's a whole worrying development outside of what we're talking about just now, and there's a whole worrying development with the police use of these technologies. And I don't know if you've heard there in Texas, but North Dakota this month, it was last month, sorry, late last month, passed a new bill saying that the police are now allowed to arm their drones with less than lethal weapons. And that means that the North Dakota police now can arm their drones with tasers, with rubber bullets, firing rifles that fire rubber bullets, tear gas, and a pepper spray. And this is a very, very worrying development to me because it gives the police too much power to control.
Well, absolutely. And North Dakota, I mean, they don't even have that much of a population there. So why do they need to authorize their police to have armed drones with less?
Well, they're one of the biggest drone users in the US, in fact, for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they don't have such a big population. So, but anything that starts there, it's like a domino effect, isn't it? They will test it out there, and if it works out well, it will spread. And already in South Africa, these tools are being used to suppress protests.
Exactly.
So, you're going to see peaceful protest, because the problem is that what you consider to be a peaceful protest can change over time. Laws can change. And the more control you have, you're not putting police officers in harm's way. You can fly overhead, fire pepper spray, fire tasers. So you start getting a large protest like Occupy Wall Street, that kind of thing. And, the police can move in and pick people off and certainly photograph them and steal their private data.
Oh, absolutely. And we've just recently reported that the UN in the US, they're forming their global Stasi network, policing the globe, basically. And we see Saudi Arabia is beheading two young men who were 17 at the time that they were arrested for protesting against the government. So, of course, they're going to be going after extremists. And those terrorists that they are actually looking for are people who are going to be against the totalitarianism of the state. It's not going to be actually people who are attaching bombs to these drones, such as they are with these.
No, exactly. Well, the problem with the word terrorism, sometimes we call them freedom fighters. It depends on what side you're on.
Mm-hmm.
Really. I mean, the United States used to bomb the redcoats from civilians, and they certainly didn't call them terrorists in the United States when they did that. Sometimes it's the only way for populations to stop an authoritarian government is to rise against it. And the more technological weapons you have, the harder that is. It really is.
Absolutely. And then so talking about the ethics with these military robots, can they get away with war crimes? If a robot unlawfully kills someone in the heat of battle, who's to blame?
That's a very big problem, and it's very difficult to give a satisfactory answer. I mean, the answer that concerns a lot of military people, in fact. I've spoken to quite a few military commanders, and they're concerned because they say the buck always stops with them, but they're not happy about it because they don't understand how they work. And the other thing about them is, of course, it would be easy to commit a war crime with this kind of robot weapon and then just blow it up afterwards so there's no trace. I mean, you can't hold a robot accountable for a war crime. And it could easily be the software manufacturer. People can hack into them. I mean, Honda cars have been hacked into and the brakes applied and the steering wheel turned so they skid. So you can hack into anything. I mean, I've actually met somebody who flies drones that hack into other drones and steal them.
Wow.
So we're moving into a technological future, and I think we're not thinking about it enough. I mean, I don't think you can't really hold back the tide of technology or stifle innovation and stop jobs. But certainly you really need to be thinking about it a lot more. There's not really any joined up thinking. And the US, for a start, should have really a strong committee that are looking at these things constantly and thinking about the near future. And we're not talking about 50 years away. We're talking about now, this minute in time. Like it could happen next year. When North Dakota are getting these weapons, what will they have next year? And you have a company in Texas, in fact, called Chaotic Moon. It's a robot company. And they have made this little, and people say nowhere else but Texas would you see this. They've made this little autonomous drone, right? So it's a drone that flies completely on its own without any humans. And what it does is it hovers over your backyard. And it's called Cupid, the drone. And it's called Cupid because it hovers over your backyard. And if somebody enters your property, it will say, leave immediately. And if they don't leave, it tasers them. So it fires a taser dart at them, 50,000 volts, and keeps them there until you arrive back or the authorities arrive back.
Wow.
And that's quite something. And I can imagine police using those for area denial. So they'll say, instead of putting up barbed wire or whatever, you say, this area is denied. And if you enter into it, you're going to get tasered.
Right. And of course, they won't use those at the border. But I remember when they were displaying that during South by Southwest a year or so ago, they said that they had a lot of interest from law enforcement. And they were like, well, this is just a prototype. We just did this to show people how dangerous it is that we're just advancing with this technology and there aren't any rules saying, no, you can't attach a taser to a drone. Well, now let's talk a little bit about, we're moving forward with this. Can we stop a negative outcome?
Yes. I mean, we can have new laws. One thing, the pressure we're putting on the UN with this CCW committee, it's strange, but if we succeed in getting a prohibitive ban, an international treaty, it will only apply to international armed conflict. It will not apply to domestic use. So, for instance, tear gas is not allowed at all. It's totally prohibited in war. So you can't use it in conflicts, but the police can use it. And so getting this prohibition will not stop your police or anybody's police from using it. But what you can do is there's another committee that we're pushing for. We're really working hard to get them to pay attention, and that's called the Human Rights Council. Now, the Human Rights Council, they set up our human rights, basic human rights for the entire planet. And if we can get them to say, you must not arm these drones and these autonomous weapons onto police mustn't use them, then they won't be used. I mean, they might be used, but they'll be in violation of the Human Rights Council, and nobody wants that, really.
Now, are you talking about the same Human Rights Council that has just chosen Saudi Arabia to be one of the leaders?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. But the thing about the Human Rights Council is, I mean, you don't always get the best choices, but the good thing about it is it's not dominated by Western countries. It rotates. So the members rotate all the time, and that's a good thing. So, sometimes you can draw a bad hand, sometimes you can draw a good hand. But if you look at the Security Council, then you've got Russia, China, United States, the UK, and France dominating it. All 5 of those countries have a right to veto. So no matter what votes are taken, even if the vast majority say, yes, we mustn't do this or we mustn't go and fight this war, those countries can veto it. But with the Human Rights Council, they can't veto anything. So it's a fairer group of people. Though it might not always be you can't always guarantee. The thing about if you have a United Nations, you have to go with the fact that you have to include all nations and you have to put up with it. And the only reason why it works is because there's so many people. You've got such a diversity of opinion that, you hope that the good washes out of it. But I have to say, my experience of the United Nations over the last 3 years is that the United States is really the dominant force there. They're the world superpower. It's quite clear when you go there.
Right. And I guess that's why it's obvious why this is such an important thing. Rand Paul famously filibustered just several years ago, pointing out the fact that we don't have any laws on the books dealing with how the U.S. can target Americans on U.S. soil with these drones. And
no, that's right.
There's nothing set up.
No, I mean, I think there would be a lot of complaint if you did, but there was a very close case. If you remember, there was that, I can't remember his name. It was about a year ago, 2 years ago. That guy who had been a law enforcement officer, and he was a homicidal maniac, and he had escaped, and he'd gone to this shack, and they sent out a drone, and they would have killed him with the drone, but instead they set fire to the shack and killed him that way.
Right. Yeah, that was a huge conspiracy here and a lot of things going on with that. Well, Noel Sharkey, thank you so much. AI expert, and I think this is going to be a huge issue in the days coming forward. I know Matt Drudge, that was one of the topics he kept pointing out over and over again while he was here, is to just keep our eyes on this technology, how it's going to be augmenting our reality as well as our culture. And obviously, autonomous weapons is a huge deal. Who's going to be in control of these things? Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Leanne. A pleasure to be on the program.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, there you have it. As you mentioned, we've got the UN Human Rights Council in control of how these autonomous weapons are going to be deployed. That is the same Human Rights Council that now has Saudi Arabia, who crucifies anyone who dare protest the way that their country is being run. Crucifixion meaning being beheaded and then displayed there in the public square. And these are the type of extremists that the UN Global Police Force is going to be looking out for, too.
All right, so there you have it. And I thought that Leanne, who's I thought was a little bit amateurish, she's getting a bit better at InfoWars. And I think probably as the years progress, if she continues on doing her job over there, she'll get better and better. A little more natural. She needs to get a little more natural. But she's good. She's doing fine. And certainly has the facts well in hand and is able to express herself clearly, distinctly. So that's a lot. That's really good right there. So as I was mentioning before, I felt that this science fiction world was something for the future. But it turns out the future is now, and we're almost there in some ways. Now, the question is, what is going to happen, and what will our role, if any, be in this kind of world, if this world does end up looking very much like what we've got. It could all, of course, turn around. Laws could be enacted, and curbs might be put on the global arms race. That is a definite possibility, because we saw the arms race happen back in the middle of the 20th century, and in a way it's still going on with conventional arms. And some people sort of don't mind this because it provides jobs for both sides. You have the enormous corporations creating the weapons of war and continuing the ongoing struggle between the competitors who are constantly trying to either retain the position of top dog or knock the other country off that position of top dog. Once the world, if the world were ever to coalesce into one enormous state, a global state, in which there would be no countries, there would be no borders, then you might say, well, that would be the end of war. But we've already seen, by looking at the way history in the 21st century is so far developing, that the wars continue to happen even when the fighters on both sides are not strictly adherents or loyal to any particular country. They're loyal to their friends, to their tribe, to their religion, and to whomever hires them, essentially. They're mercenaries. And a lot of times these countries that hire these mercenaries are more or less corporations. The state, the individual country, when it more and more is taken over by a corporation or a cartel of corporations, becomes a corporate state. And they have no particular interest in the well-being of the citizens of that country. Their loyalty will almost inevitably fall on the side of themselves. They're looking out for their careers, their jobs, their status, their position in society, and the position of the shareholders. And the shareholders are almost exclusively the extreme wealthy people. Most people don't own a lot of stock, if any, in a corporation. And so they're not stakeholders. Now, the corporations like to use the term stakeholder because they're trying to be inclusive, but this is just another way to try to throw people off the track and make them feel all warm and fuzzy inside, when really they're not. They're just a consumer, and the corporation is trying to feed on that consumer by creating a false need that so that the consumer is brainwashed or manipulated or motivated through various techniques of subliminal advertising and so on, that they want that particular product. They don't know why they want it, but they do. They feel like they must have it. Something in their brain is telling them that they just don't feel comfortable unless they get that particular brand of whatever it would be. If like for instance, a brand of soap or something. They feel like, oh, the only good soap is Irish Spring or something. And if they don't have Irish Spring, then they just don't feel clean, and they just like the way it smells, or they believe it's natural, or something like that. And they always get Irish Spring. I'm an Irish Spring guy, or they might, have their own particular favorite brand of cereal in the morning that they always get, and they just don't feel right if they don't get it. Just like cigarettes, or you drink, oh, I'm a Bud guy, I drink Budweiser, this and that. It's called branding, and corporations are very, very attuned to this, and they know that if they can get someone branded with that fixation on their particular product, they will have a lifelong customer, and that's what they want. So, you're looking at a future in which the corporation becomes the state becomes the corporation, and you have the revolving door policy in which the elected and appointed officials of a state will, as soon as their tenure is over at the state, they will drop right into their office, their cushy job at the corporation, and vice versa. That's why they call it a revolving door, because it just goes around and around, and they are the same people. The leaders of the state they know that once they step down from being president, they'll have a cushy job, or whatever their job would be in government, that their job is waiting for them, as long as they conform and steer business and steer the laws in such a way that this will be beneficial to the corporation, that they after all, down the road, will be employees or on the board of directors or a CEO or an assistant to the president or whatever. They will be getting their income from that entity. So you have to wonder, where does their loyalty lie? And the amazing thing is that all too often, people don't really see it. We get lost in our, and I'm including myself, we get lost in our own affairs, and we just want to live a simple, basic, happy life. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing. As long as we realize that there are all these other forces out there that are trying to manipulate us, trying to exploit us, trying to include us for their own nefarious purposes, to load our brains full of information, and some of that information is disinformation. And also, there are powerful forces that is attempting to prevent us from learning other information that could be beneficial to us. George Orwell said that the most pernicious form of lying is the lie of omission. That's where you simply don't tell a key part. You don't reveal a key part of that story. And without that key part, that key little event that really turns it around, then that story falls into another little segment of your brain, the one that accepts it, the one that figures, it's not that big of a deal. You know, the one that just goes, oh, I don't believe that. That's impossible. You know, they left out the key piece of it that would make you go, oh my God, this is awful. We got to do something about this. Instead, you go, so what? No biggie. Not important. Or whatever they're attempting to do, you fall exactly in line with their purpose. That would be to make you do whatever they consider is in their best interests and not in your best interests. So it's just a matter of keeping yourself informed, but not losing your sense of humor. I think a sense of humor is really important. And people who are soldiers, and they can tell you this, will joke around in the most dire circumstances. You know, on the battlefield, in the trenches, in World War I, they're telling jokes while bombs are falling and people are dying all around them. And why do you do that? People do that because they have to, in order to keep their sanity in an extreme situation. The world is all about change and throwing people out of the status quo and into a situation where they are left to their own devices and forced to come up with solutions using their creative thinking ability because they have no other choice. And it helps to create a little bulwark, a little barrier against the pain, the agony, the trauma by using humor. And it gives you a breathing room. You can take a breath, you can catch your breath and get a little emotional distance from your situation, whatever that might be, and as dire and dangerous as that situation might be. So that's why it's extremely important to help you to enjoy being alive. That's number one. That's why we're here, to have that experience of being alive, not from necessarily doing anything. It's not what you do, it's more about who you are than about what you do. Because what you are is something you were born with, your humanity. And the true joy of living comes from the ability to drop your pain. You know, let it go. You know, you don't have to carry it around with you every minute of every day. And it shows when you're able to drop your burden, even temporarily, it shows that you have trust that everything's going to be okay. And by dropping your burden, it doesn't mean not taking care of your responsibilities. It's an internal thing. It's a mental thing. It's an attitude. It's an attitude that it's going to be okay. That I'm alive and I'm breathing, and isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Just that. That alone is amazing. I can enjoy being alive because I'm alive, not because I'm driving a fancy car or I have a prestigious job or a wonderful family or I'm rich or something like that. None of those things have anything to do with being alive. The very poorest person on the planet is just as alive as the very richest person. And so this is something that we can all do. There are no barriers. There are no classes. There are no restrictions on any of that. If a person is at the top of their game, or if they're languishing in prison, they can experience their own aliveness equally. And so, you might say, well, that's so simple. It's so, anybody could do that. That would be, it can't be that simple. It can't be. Happiness, just by letting go of my pain, letting go of my concepts, my ideas, my dreams, letting go of my dreams. What about, I can't let go of my dreams. Well, maybe not permanently, but maybe just for, maybe for a few seconds, you could let go of your dreams. Because dreams are the great driver. You could say, well, if I didn't have my dreams, then I wouldn't have any direction. I wouldn't have any motivation to get to a point where my life could be better and my life and everything could be wonderful because, I would have fulfilled my dreams. And yeah, sure, that's what they say, oh, you can be anything you want. You can be, if you can dream it, you can be it. Well, I hope that's true, I guess. But, let's face it. How many movie stars do they need? 20, 30, 40, 50? How many people want to be movie stars? Well, if there's more than 20, 30, 40, or 50 places for movie stars, then, if there are more people who are wanting to be movie stars than there are places for movie stars in Hollywood, then the chances are pretty clear that it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to fight the odds and beat the odds against you being a movie star. So no, dreams do not always come true. They can't. It just doesn't work that way. It never could. Never does work that way. Ultimately, we are all going to be gone, and at some point we're going to be gone, and then we will be most likely forgotten. Our names will not be engraved on Grauman's Theater in Hollywood on the sidewalk with a star, our name and a star. That is not going to happen for 99.999% of us, or anything similar to that, where people will be walking on our name all day or oohing and aahing or taking pictures of it, like they do about the stars on Hollywood Boulevard. So, what we do have is far more amazing and far more exciting and far more interesting than what we don't have. And what we don't have is something we can strive for, but let's not strive for it every minute of every day, and enjoy what we do have, because ultimately that's probably all we're going to end up with anyway, is what we do have, not what we don't have. So it's important, I think, for human beings to realize that there's another aspect to this. It's really good and really interesting, and that is that not only can I enjoy what I do have, but everyone else has it too, and they can also enjoy it. And that feeling of enjoyment of being alive is the same that we have, is the same feeling that the next guy has or is capable of having, that enjoyment of being alive. And that makes us all the same. That's the one thing that is the same for every human being. And that truly does make us, that unites. That is a uniter. And the thing about it is, if we load ourselves down with a persona, with a belief system, with a construct that we carry around in our brains, this enormous, elaborate machine that we have created, and we keep adding to it, and the subtleties of it, and the ins and outs of it. And the older we get, the more elaborate it gets. And we have to do this in order to do this. Well, we have our routines, we have our habits. I like things a certain way. And I can't be happy unless I have this way and this way, and everything has to be just so, or I just don't feel right. I just don't feel comfortable. I need to have the latest outfit on, and I need it. It's like a little kid, you're looking at the toy in the window of the shop or something, and you say, I need that. And you tell your mom or your dad, I need that. I really need it. Please buy it for me. And of course you don't really need it, but you feel like you need it at that time. That you just can't live without it. You're really excited about it. You really want it. And so you get it, maybe. And then it's really fun for a while, but then sort of, it's not that great anymore. It's sort of old, boring, same old, same old. Then another excitement, another toy, another game catches your eye, and you want that. And then on and on and on. And here we are today. And the older we get, does any of that really change? It turns out that if we allow ourselves to enjoy being alive, that you can make a huge difference. We can make a huge difference in the quality of our own life. And the life is a magical event that we are participating in, and we better appreciate it and be grateful for it, because it's not going to last very long. Nobody gets to stay here very long, really. And we can do all kinds of things in life. That's why we're here. That's one of the major reasons. I mean, we can participate, we can enjoy, we can do all these things. That's all part of the fun of it. It's all part of the adventure. And some of those things may not even be that pleasant. But we can nevertheless have our safe harbor that we can go to that is us, and we can go there and just get out of that storm. The storm isn't going to stop. Let's say we're in a, if you use the metaphor of you're a ship, you're on a ship, and the storms, and you're crossing the ocean, and that's your life, and the storm comes. Well, you can ride it out, or you can duck into cover in a harbor where those waves are a lot lower, and just feel safe. So that's what really we can look forward to. We can enjoy it, and it doesn't matter, when we start appreciating our life, but when we do, it's going to make all those years that we didn't appreciate it. We'll see that, all those years that I didn't appreciate being alive, I was learning something in those years. I was learning that I needed to appreciate being alive. So, yeah, the role of the unrolling, the unfolding of history in the human race, in the United States, we're a small part of an enormous story that is unrolling, and you're fascinated by it. I know I am. I'm fascinated. I'm thinking, where's it going to go? I've always been interested in the future, and is it going to turn into a totalitarian police state? Are people going to wake up and just say, no, we're not going to do this? Are people going to become really aware and feel that peace that every person can feel, that feeling of peace, and therefore some more and more wonderful things will happen to them, just because that's how it works. And I think the way it's going to work is that those people who are not feeling peace in their lives and are building this giant artificial structure around themselves, they're going to be weighed down by that artificial structure that they're creating around themselves to carry around every moment of their lives. And they're going to be kind of grumpy. They're going to be grumpy. And they're going to be looking to get some peace in their life. That's what everybody wants. And some people who are very rich and very powerful think that they're just annoyed by people, and they just feel like, we just need to get rid of them. I don't like them. I like my friends, I like my family, I like the people I work with, but all these other people, they have to go. We have the power to get rid of them. So why don't we do something about this? Why don't we get rid of them? And then somebody will tell them, well, we could lower the population of the planet if we would allow these people to progress up to the level that we are, or something approximating that level of prosperity. If we give them, a really nice lifestyle, if we allow them to progress to the point where they're living in almost a first world lifestyle, they have prosperity, they have jobs, they have careers, they have houses, they have mortgages, they have cars, they have access to public transport and good quality healthy food and good clothes and things to keep them occupied, all kinds of options, then they're not going to have children, because we've seen this happen over and over and over. We know that's the way humans work. Once they get really established, they stop having kids. Why? They're too damn busy. They're enjoying their lives. They're enjoying their toys, playing with their toys, et cetera, et cetera. And they're educated, and they have access to birth control, whatever that they want, and they stop having kids. Many of these European countries have a problem with their citizens not reproducing themselves. This is happening in Germany, it's happening in Poland, it's happening in Italy, I believe it's happening in France, and even in England. These Nordic countries like Sweden, Denmark, Holland, all the countries that have the highest standard of living in the world, they are getting to the point where their leadership is beginning to panic a little bit. And so there is perhaps a hidden agenda with this mass migration that they're encouraging on some level into these countries. My understanding is that Germany actually needs people and needs workers. This is not the only time that they have brought in a lot of foreign workers who ended up staying, and that was back in the 60s. The 60s, there was a boom in the economy in Germany. There were a lot of manufacturing growing, and they just didn't have the manpower or the woman power to run the show, the expanding economy. And so they were hiring people from the poorer countries like Greece. I was over there in the 60s. I was working over there myself. That's why I got a job when I was 17 years old over in Germany, because they were looking for workers. I was just out of high school. I got a job over there. And it was a great experience for me. I didn't, I ended up coming back here instead of permanently going there, but they needed workers. Maybe something like that is happening again. And of course, the German expansion, Germany was almost destroyed in World War II. They lost an enormous number of citizens, and they had to rebuild the country. And after they rebuilt it, then it became the economic powerhouse that it is today, and it is now apparently the most prosperous country in Europe. And it's sort of the leader of the EU, even though the capital of the EU is in Belgium, in Brussels. So this is perhaps the hidden agenda. And we know that the planners, the global planners, want to create larger and larger groups of amalgamated, unified states, so that the United States of Europe is a word that's being bandied about for the EU. The EU was created not as a political entity, but it was an economic union. But right from the beginning, even when they had the common market, the European common market, back in the way back in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, before they got the EU together, European Union, they knew that ultimately they would need to have a political union, not just an economic union. They knew an economic union would never last, because you just don't have the laws in place to force everybody to share and share alike. Like we have the federal government of the United States. The federal government runs the show over the states. Although there are certainly, yes, the states do have some rights, but the federal government sort of is the top dog in the government. And so this is part of the plan. It's better for business, not necessarily better for the people, because the government is far away from you. You can't get your hands on those officials and really keep them in line. That's why there's a lot of shenanigans going on. The whole EU may break up. So it's an experiment in the ultimate goal, which is one man essentially running the entire planet. The global emperor. I wonder who it will be if it ever happens. Okay, that's all there is for today. Have a great weekend and sleep well, friends.